name's Scott Bell. I'm a professor of geography in the Department of Geography and Planning at the University of Saskatchewan.
Hi, I'm Darren Brabham, and I'm an assistant professor in the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism at the University of Southern California.
Hi everyone, my name is Renee Sieber. I'm a professor of geography at McGill University. I'm also jointly appointed with the School of Environment at McGill University.
I'm an associate professor in the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies at Ryerson University here in Toronto.
This notion of crowdsourcing municipal data, where does this come from? This comes from the idea that citizens are effective sensors and they can often respond more quickly to events on the ground than cities can. There are many more citizens than there are city government workers, and particularly in an era in which governments are needing to reduce their budgets. Sometimes it's most effective to utilize citizens to report on incidents on the ground. Sometimes you have to utilize citizens because you no longer have the staff.
Do I think there are any questions about authenticity and accuracy with crowdsourced data? Yes and no. So I think, yes, if you ask people who aren't familiar with producing professional quality data to produce data for a map or some sort of other system, you're going to get a lot of errors. You're going to get a lot of data that are rough around the edges. You're going to get typos for people typing in data on the fly on their phones. You're going to get all sorts of errors. But the reality is that when you get enough people together, the logic of crowdsourcing is that, you know, and there's kind of beauty in many. So if you get 9, 10, 100 people that report a certain location on a map, the odds of it being accurate are pretty good, because only one or two might be an error. Now, if only one person is reporting some sort of feature on a map, then it's kind of up to them to get it right. And so if they're wrong, they're wrong. So the better crowdsourcing applications, the more accurate ones, tend to have large numbers.
One of the reasons that cities and governments in general rely on crowdsourcing data is because they can get accurate sentiments of the public, that they can get accurate senses of what's happening on the ground.
There's still new evidence coming out today about telephone survey design and how valid someone's response is. And there are really relatively straightforward, maybe elegant or cute ways of validating such results. And I'll just give you a quick example. So we could do a sample of 5% of the population or 1% of the population, call them up and ask them a bunch of questions. And one of those questions might be, do you own a passport? Or it might be, are you employed? And a discussion about how they're employed or something like that. And then we can go to Canadian Government Statistics Canada database and find out how many Canadians have a passport and validate that a 1% sample of the population accurately depicts the total number of passports. So by only asking 1% of the population, you get a very valid and reliable measure of the total number. That's just one example from survey research that's been well known for, it's why we're able to do random samples of 1% of the population and then generalize to the population. Crowdsourcing, it's not quite as easy to do that validation, verification stage, and I don't think that the elegant methods for doing it are quite there yet.
It actually depends on what kind of data we're looking at. So with my PhD student, Victoria Fass, I've published a couple papers recently that are relevant here. One is about types of user-generated geographic contents. We distinguish things like a passive collection of user data from active submission. There is so in the passive case, accuracy would perhaps depend more on technical details of the sensors being used. As an example of active contribution, some sites limit user input to selection among predefined categorical data. So I think that the predefining the possible input that reduces inaccuracies in the submitted data. But another type of volunteer geographic information are opinions about planning projects. So in that case, I don't think there is a measure for accuracy, and so it's something that we may have to accept that.
The assumption that professionals who produce maps or produce these data somehow are better than amateurs, quote unquote amateurs, or that they're infallible, I think is a bit misleading. And while they might have the training to produce the data in better ways and do it cleaner, and they might have better tools, people they still make errors. Human error still happens. Professionals have a specific view of the world that colors their perspective on how they create data. And if you're relying on one expert to produce a pin on a map, is that any better than 100 where 99 agree from the crowd? In many ways, you could argue that the crowd's better. So there's a lot of kind of caveats to saying that crowdsourced data is less reliable or accurate or authentic. And if anything, it's more authentic, right? They're living in these spaces. That they were there when they reported this data with their phone, for instance. So it really, if anything, raises more questions about what is authenticity, what is reliability and accuracy, and how do data points get created. The creation of information is not a clean, infallible process. It's not a divinely inspired thing. We're all responsible for making it. So I think the answer is that amateurs, quote unquote amateurs, and professionals are really much more alike than they're different. And I think the quality of work they produce is much more alike than different. Errors and accuracy and all.
When you ask a community to provide information, I think, I might be biased, ironically, but I think that the potential for bias in those communities is pretty high, and we have to be careful about those open invitations to participate. I think that's one of the most exciting things about volunteer geographic information and crowdsourcing is that we can get some excited and engaged people involved in that kind of research, but is their excitement and engagement part of the problem or a research issue we have to deal with? So verification, I think that everybody that uses crowdsourced data knows that they have to be sensitive to that stuff.
If you're going to rely on social media platforms, on harvesting those social media platforms to get a sense of public sentiment, you need to have some sense that the data is accurate for the individuals that you're collecting information about, the public that you're trying to assess. What you need is you need to get a sense of its authenticity. There's a lot of research that talks about how people aren't their authentic selves on social media platforms. They perform on social media platforms. They aspire to be things that they aren't necessarily now, that they are more aggressive online, they are more opinionated, they are less nuanced online, they are more right-wing or more left-wing than they actually are in real life. Therefore, if you're going to get a sense of public sentiment, you want to get a sense of authentic feelings, not the ranting and the flaming that may go on these platforms. So you may get a sense that people hate an idea, hate a park proposal in a city, when they're actually, if you got them together in a room, they wouldn't be as angry, and they might be willing to shift their opinions. So it becomes incredibly important to get a sense of how authentic people are online. And that's why authenticity really matters with crowdsourced data.
The wisdom of the crowd. I think there's technical means that can be taken that others may know more about than I do, that use the wisdom of the crowd, as it's called, to ensure accuracy of crowdsourced data. So I'm thinking to require user registration, so not everybody can submit data, but only registered users. There are many instances that we found, including Ushahidi applications online, where user contributions are actually authorized by someone behind the scenes. So that would supposedly ensure accuracy and authenticity. There is ways to have other users flag misuse or wrong information, like you can see on for example, newspaper commenting sections. Retailers use reviews or ratings of products and services by other users, which to me is a way to address accuracy of crowdsourced data. And finally, other contributors often monitor areas or sections of data, re-edit what others have submitted, gain levels of credibility, and so on. Here I'm thinking the mechanisms behind OpenStreetMap that address the issue that way.
Geothink's video interviews are brought to you by generous funding from Canada's Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. Stay tuned for more and keep up with our latest at geothink.ca.